When it comes to video games, films and pop culture in general, horror is my favourite genre. But you probably already knew that, especially if you've been around on the channel for a little while. 70% at least of the things I cover tend to sit within the horror genre. So with it being spooky season, I thought I would put together a definitive list of the very best VR horror games that you can buy in 2024. Let's get into it. Up first, in dead last place, at number 15 is Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. Now don't get mad at me. Just because I've put this particular game at number 15 doesn't mean it's a bad game. It doesn't even mean it's the worst game on this list. I just don't think it's that scary. Remember, we're doing a best horror games list here, and Walking Dead Saints and Sinners is an absolutely fantastic game. From the physics, the locations, the combat, the stealth, the scavenging, it's all incredible. But I don't think the game is particularly scary. There are a few moments throughout the generous runtime that did spook me and made me not want to continue playing, but they are quite few and far between. Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, in my opinion, is more of an action-adventure game with a horror theme. But maybe I'm just completely and utterly desensitized to zombies. If Walking Dead Saints and Sinners deserves to sit in the 15th spot for being more of an action-adventure game, then Lies Beneath deserves to be in the 14th spot for basically all the same reasons. Now once again, don't get me wrong, when it wants to be, this cel-shaded comic book horror adventure can be terrifying. It knows how to build tension and suspense by the bucket load, but most of the scares and horror elements throughout the experience come from the difficulty of the challenge at hand. Lies Beneath is a brutal game that really challenges players' combat prowess, and it's in those moments that I felt the most afraid, and mainly just of running out of bullets. Okay, just to show you all I'm being fair and I'm not being biased or anything like that, Resident Evil 2, one of my favourite games of all time, is coming in at number 13 for, again, many of the same reasons that I just spoke about with Walking Dead Saints and Sinners and Lies Beneath. Now, Resident Evil 2, specifically with the Prey Dog VR mod, is a terrifying game for the first hour and a half to 2 hours, and then it does start to slowly become more of an action-adventure game once again. You become slightly more desensitized to the zombies as you progress through. The scares can't keep up for the entire duration, but that first section in the RPD is absolutely horrifying. The zombies look hyper-realistic. They take a ridiculous amount of bullets to go down, and you can cut through the atmosphere with a knife, especially walking down the dark corridors with your torch in hand. It's beautifully atmospheric, and this game is something I think everyone should play in VR. I just don't think it's particularly scary past a certain point. Okay, we're starting to shift into more traditionally scary, psychologically scarring horror game territory now, and kicking us off at number 12 is Bloober Team's Blair Witch VR. Now, if you've played any of Bloober Team's games, you'll know that they can do atmosphere when they want to. The recent Silent Hill 2 remake is Bloober at the top of their game, but a lot of what works really well in Silent Hill is also present here in Blair Witch. Wandering this maze-like woods in the pitch black of night with just your torch to light the way can be genuinely deeply unsettling, and the audio design of branches cracking and breaking off in the distance or just behind you is enough to spook even the hardest of gamers. However, without delving into spoilers too much, the monster design for the creatures that hunt you for most of the game's duration is a little underwhelming, and once you've seen them once, you do quickly become quite desensitized to them. Also, you do have an adorable dog to take the edge off the scares, which means it lands a bit further down the list. When I first loaded up Paranormal Activity: The Lost Soul, I really expected it to be garbage. But this game packs way more punch than you'd expect it to. This is actually one of the best story-driven haunted house VR experiences that I've ever played, and it probably would be the best if it wasn't for a few better ones releasing in recent years. Now, unless you're fussed about seeing both of the different endings, I'm pretty sure there were 2 and no more than 2, then this is the kind of game you would only play once. But that's absolutely fine. It's a nerve-shredding thrill ride, and I think all horror-loving VR gamers should experience it at least one time. Also, quick tip for those of you who are a little bit more sensitive to jump scares: if you find yourself in Grandma's room in Paranormal Activity: The Lost Soul, don't get too close. She ain't sleeping. In at number 10 is a game that I hold really near and dear to my heart. This is Wraith The Oblivion Afterlife, and it's so special to me because this is the first game that was given to me before release. This was Fast Travel Games taking a chance on a small creator. At this point, I didn't have very many subscribers, I wasn't getting huge amounts of views, but I reached out and they sent me a press kit and they gave me a key to the game. It's kind of special. You're always going to remember stuff like that. Over and above that though, this is a terrifying game. Wraith The Oblivion Afterlife has some of the most unique and unsettling creatures in all of the games on this list, and being stalked by them is horrifying. There is one particular creature, just a really tall, lanky man, that absolutely ruined me. Wraith The Oblivion Afterlife is a fantastic cat and mouse stealth-driven horror game that gets better and better and scarier the longer you play. Honestly, the third act of this game, the last section, would probably be at the very top of this list if it was a list of the scariest moments in VR games. The third act is deeply troubling and very challenging to get through. In at number 9 we have the first game on this list which treads a really careful line between hilarious and absolutely terrifying. This is The Forest in VR, of course. Now this game, if you're playing on your own, is almost always terrifying. In the middle of the day, you're panicking about the night, you're trying to build a base, and then when night falls and the creatures come out, it is mind-meltingly horrific. If you play with a friend, however, it can be absolutely hilarious. There is a lot of fun to be had in this game, especially again during the daytime, cutting down trees together, building the base, mucking around, hunting for animals. So much fun to be had if you play this game with a friend. But even with a friend, when night falls, or when you descend into the caves in search of special supplies, it all goes wrong pretty quickly. This game has some horrific creatures, and I can vividly remember playing this with friends and not wanting to go into those caves, or being in those caves and not wanting to move because I knew there were creatures lurking around the corner. The Forest, hilarious, but also terrifying. I really wanted to place this particular game a little bit higher on this list, but after mulling it over in my mind and looking at all the games I've laid out here, I think 8th place is the best and fairest position for it to land in. This is the Exorcist Legion VR, a game that takes place across multiple chapters, each with their own unique stories, locations, and demons to face off against. It's a unique concept and one that keeps the runtime exciting and fresh, but it's also the reason it doesn't land a little bit higher on this list. And that's because not all chapters are made equal. Some, like the initial church location and the house with the baby in the attic, are bone-chilling and filled with great jump scares, but others fall a little bit flat and don't deliver as many impactful moments. On the whole, however, the Exorcist Legion manages to deliver big leap-out-of-your-skin moments during its campaign, and I can't wait to see what the sequel, which apparently has full co-op play, has in store. Okay, hear me out now. I would argue that Resident Evil 7, which is coming in at the number 7 spot on this list, is the most horror-centric and true to its roots new Resident Evil game since before Resident Evil 4 initially launched on the GameCube. Since that point, since Resi 4, all of the games in the franchise have taken more of an action-adventure skew rather than a survival-horror skew. But Resi 7 came out of nowhere like a shot in the heart and reinvigorated this franchise, took it back to the roots, made it slower, more atmospheric, tighter, more puzzle-centric, and didn't overcomplicate it with tons of different evolving enemies. Resident Evil 7 is one of the best haunted house horror games you can play in VR, and the house isn't even haunted. It just feels like it is because the level design, the visuals and the atmosphere are so strong, and they paint a picture of a place that you would never ever want to find yourself in. The Baker Mansion really is the main antagonist of this game. Well, also the horrible people who live there, they're not great either, but the house is the star of the show. Look, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why is a game that looks like this sitting at number 6 on a best VR horror games list? Well, don't worry, I'm going to tell you why it's here. This is Dread Halls. It's an oldie, it doesn't look particularly terrifying, but trust me, it is a goldie. This game is still fantastic right now in 2024 if you want a horror VR experience that will shake you to the very core of your being. Now, don't get me wrong, visuals are nice. Having the shiniest, newest, most realistic graphics in your scary VR horror game is great. If you see a creature lumbering towards you and it looks super realistic, yes, that is horrifying. But I do think visuals are probably the least important part of making a great horror game. Sound design, atmosphere, and creating a sense of dread, building a sense of tension is way more important, and Dread Halls does all of that with a simplistic visual style and colour palette. These dungeons are filled to the absolute brim with creatures that want to kill you, and the first time you encounter one of these creatures, you won't necessarily know how to beat it or even navigate past it. Every creature has its own set of rules that you need to learn, so repeat playthroughs are necessary, but each time you play, the creatures are in different locations, so it's so hard to get good at a game like this. Dread Halls is absolutely soaking in atmosphere, and it does it all with a very simplistic art style. This is still one I would highly recommend everyone play if you love horror games. Now, I just told you all that Dread Halls is fantastic, and it is, but this right here, the follow-up from the same developer, Cosmo Dread, is even better, and it completely deserves the number 5 spot in this best VR horror games of all time list. Now, much like Dread Halls, Cosmo Dread also plonks players into randomly generated environments that can't be learnt from playthrough to playthrough. The rooms, the items, the objectives, and the enemies are all remixed, and they're going to be different each and every time you play. And that sense of the unknown is nerve-destroying in a game like this, where making it to and from your objectives is so reliant on not getting jumped by a horrible space spider as you're walking through a dark corridor. Cosmo Dread improved on everything that made Dread Halls so successful, and it dials up the atmosphere to 11. It also has some of the worst, most horrifying enemies I've ever seen in a VR horror game, including one particular creature that teleports every time the lights flicker on and off, and they flicker on and off a lot. That guy has given me enough small heart attacks to last me a very short lifetime. Remember at the start of this video where I said Resident Evil 2 in VR with the Prey Dog VR mod is scary for the first hour and a half. When you're in the RPD, it's absolutely terrifying, but then it gets kind of more action-packed in the back end of the game. Well, Propagation Paradise Hotel is basically what would happen if that first hour of Resident Evil 2 in VR was just the entire game, but it got progressively more nerve-shredding as you got towards the finale. This game is horrible, and it doesn't let up for the entire duration. I didn't once feel safe and relaxed during my time with Propagation Paradise Hotel. This is the ultimate homage to the original Resident Evil. If you want Resident Evil 1 in VR, this is the closest thing we've got. The environment, the backtracking, the enemies that you think are dead but somehow get up later on and reanimate, the inventory and ammo management, it all feels like classic Resident Evil, and it is a nerve-shredding experience from start to finish. Propagation Paradise Hotel is one of the very best VR horror games that we currently have. Okay, we're right at the end now. Big 3, the top 3 VR horror games of all time according to me. And in at number 3 is Alien Isolation with the VR Mother mod. Now, I will never not be angry that we didn't get the official VR support or mode that was in development for Alien Isolation. Playing this whole game with actual physical hands and VR interactions would be a dream come true, and I cry about it fairly regularly, but it's okay because the VR Mother mod exists, and it does a fantastic job of plonking players into the Sevastopol station and putting us face to face with an 8-foot tall, extremely angry xenomorph who will hunt you throughout the game's entire 15 to 20 hour campaign length. This isn't just one of the best VR horror games we have, it's one of the best VR games full stop, and everyone should play it. Honestly, don't let the fact that it's a mod without proper motion control support stop you from experiencing this amazing game. Coming in at number 2, it's the smash hit VR ghost hunting sensation that took the world by storm a few years back. Now let me just get ahead of this and say, the reason that Phasmophobia sits so high on this list is because I cannot play this game single player. Every other game on this list I don't really have a problem with. Yes, they're all scary, that's why they're here, but I can play them all through to completion. Phasmophobia, on the other hand, I cannot play solo. I have never completed an entire mission of this game on my own. Now, Phasmophobia is a very funny game when you play it with friends. It can still be scary, but it's mainly funny. You have the wonky physics of the character models, you can banter with each other over the radio, you can even lock each other into cupboards. It's all in good fun and it's all a great time. But as soon as you play on your own and all that banter disappears and you don't have anyone else there to help you cut through the nerves, this is a nerve-shredding experience, especially in VR with a pair of headphones. Because the second you enter into the house and you get that noise, and if you've played Phasmophobia, you know what noise I'm talking about, it is so oppressive and it cuts through me unlike anything else. They have done such an amazing job of making this game feel unsettling. Yes, it isn't particularly scary when you play with friends, but when you play on your own, it is terrifying, and still one of the only horror games I've never managed to beat on my own. I can't even do a single mission. Oh man, this game. Madison VR is the perfect VR haunted house simulator. It is the full package. It has incredible visuals, it has great VR interactions and systems, it has atmosphere so thick you can almost taste it, and it is consistently horrifically terrifying from beginning to end. It also hits you with some sections which contain the most unrelenting jump scares I've ever known. I streamed the entire game flat screen when it came out, and certain sections had me jumping out of my skin every 20 seconds or so. In VR, that is amplified to a genuinely horrifying degree, and I do wonder if this game is actually safe for people to play. People with a heart condition definitely shouldn't play this game, but I even think that people who are completely healthy will walk away from this game with some kind of health defect, because it hits you so hard and so unrelentingly throughout its runtime with endless, intense jump scares and sections that fill you with so much dread you won't want to move forward. It also has an element of randomness. You can't predict the jump scares and you can't predict where these ghouls are going to jump out at you from. Madison is one of the scariest horror games ever, and Madison VR just is the scariest VR horror game ever. And that brings me to the end of this video. Hopefully I've given you plenty of great horror game recommendations that you can go and play in VR this Halloween, or all year round. Horror games aren't just for Halloween, they're for life. Let me know down in the comments if I've missed any of your favourite VR horror games. I would love to learn some new ones. I think at this point I've played them all, but I would love for someone to surprise me. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave a like, leave a comment, hit subscribe and all that good stuff, and I'll see you soon for another one. Take care everyone, peace out.